Hello and welcome to the Rails board meeting. Really nice to see all this in-person attendance and for those on the phone too, thank you. I'm Laura Turner, president of the Rails board, and I called a meeting this order on Friday, October 26th at 1 p.m. at the Rails Coal Valley Service Center. Emily, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Christine Barr. Here. Dave Barry.
Here.
Sue Busenbark.
Here.
Michael Campbell.
Here.
Gwen Gregory.
Here.
Liza Hickey.
Here.
Jay Caston.
Here.
Paul Mills.
Here.
Scott Poynton.
Here.
Daisy Porter Reynolds.
Here.
Dee Reynolds.
Here.
Nadia Sheikh.
Here.
Michelle Simmons.
Here.
Tom Stagg.
Here.
Laura Turner.
Here.
Everyone's here.
Yay!
Okay, let's start with recognition of guests and announcements. Here in Coal Valley, do we have any guests here in Coal Valley?
We do.
Lance Rails.
Jim Krieger, Rails.
Dan Boss from Rails.
Joe Philippek, Rails.
Veranda Pitchford, Rails.
Wesley Smith, Rails.
Emily Feister, Rails.
Deirdre Brennan Rails.
Do we have any guests in Burr Ridge? Bolingbrook? East Peoria? Illinois State Library?
Hi, this is Karen Egan.
Greg McCormick.
Pat Berg. Deborah Aggert.
Okay, Monmouth College? Or the Galesburg Public Library? Okay, we will move on to public comments. Do we have any public comments here in Coal Valley? Burr Ridge? Bolingbrook? East Peoria? Illinois State Library? Monmouth? Galesburg? Hearing no public comments, we will move to the adoption of the agenda. May I have a motion and a second for the adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Jay, second by Daisy. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Okay, approval of Rails Board minutes, financial reports, and expenditures. May I have a motion for the approval of minutes of the September 28th, 2018 Rails Board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
So that was moved by Scott and second by Dave. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Abstain.
Okay, we had one abstinence, which was Daisy. Motion carried. Next, we have the Rails financial report. And Dee is going to talk about this a little in her memo because there's a slight procedure change here. And then Jim will present, or vice versa.
I'll do the versa vice.
Okay.
So we, at ILA, and I know Jay and Dave were there as well, and Jim was there, and, and Michelle. So at a program done by Nancy Sylvester, a respected a parliamentarian, an expert on associated matters, did tell us that boards should not approve monthly financial reports, nor should they accept them, because according to Robert's Rules of Order, they're the same. They should not approve them because they are not audited. And so when the board approves them, they are essentially taking the word of someone that's not based on audited facts. Not that we're not implying anything, just that is the better way to do it. So
It's basically an interim report
Right.
before you get to the end of the year
Right.
and you issue full financial statements.
So that is our suggestion. And you were there, do you concur with that, board members? Yeah, okay. So that's all.
So Deirdre, so we're just going to listen to reports from now on, but we still will approve bill
The
expenses.
expenditure, exactly.
Right.
Yes, does that make sense? Did that?
Yes.
Okay.
I will still give the report.
Yeah.
They won't be changed. So you do have the September interim financial reports in your packets. They show that our general fund cash balance was 10.9 million, which would fund an estimated 11.2 months of operations. Still fairly comfortable. We did get our first area and per capita grant payment of $1,072,500 during the month of September. That was from last year's award, but we did get something. And in October, we got our first payment towards the 2019 award, which was just under $173,000. I believe that's from the federal funds, an allocation from that. Otherwise, our revenues through September were $1,366,000 below budget. As the area per capita grant revenues were still about 1.4 million under. Going on to expenditures, we were 392,000 below budget. The most of that was due to the lower contractual services due to not yet awarding any LSAT membership grants, but Laura signed 187,000 in checks for those such grants in October, so that variance is going to decrease quite a bit next month. But our personnel expenditures were 60,000, or 5.3% below budget due to not yet, well, we filled 4 out of 5 positions, but we have a cumulative favorable variance which will stick through September. We also received 4 new delivery vehicles, accounting for most of our capital expenditures funding. They were very sorely needed. We have more on order, mostly box trucks, I believe, and not quite sure when they're going to come. We also made the final payment for tuck pointing on our Burr Ridge facility that month. Can I answer any questions? Yes, sir.
A question regarding salary increases. Have we ever considered giving a one-time bonus instead of a salary increase, as preceding years will be based on prior year's salary, so that percentage actually becomes very large, that percentage increase? So instead of actually giving a salary increase, give a one-time, the salary remains the same, but you give a one-time bonus. So then the next year when there's an increase, again, it's not predicated on prior salary increases. Anybody do this?
We have not done that for the rail staff. And I would say that we have not done it precisely because we want their salary to continue to grow, but that doesn't mean we can't.
Okay.
Just as a matter of history for and board members who've been on the board longer, right? I think
In
that's
my discussions at the ILA conference, that came up with several other library and community people,
Yep.
trustees, directors, etc.
Yep.
that I talked with. Something that I didn't know about or understand.
sure.
So,
I'm sure it's done.
Jay, I can. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
yes.
I was just saying, Jay, at my library, we have a salary scale, of course, for the staff. Anybody that gets to, there's 40 steps. If they've stayed long enough to get to step 40, then they're done. They're not going to, their base salary is not going to increase until, and we do this periodically, the whole chart shifts up a little
Right.
bit. But in the intervening years where they're just stuck at step 40, we will consider a 1 to 4% bonus. So that, the salary is no longer growing, but there is some carrot to to kind of dangle out there,
Right.
for good performance. Yeah.
Do you have staff over the max, D? Or do you?
We have.
We have a 2 or 3, and those people are capped on their increase. So
I'm capped.
if we do award a 3% across the board increase, if it's only 1.5% that gets them to the top, that's what they get. But we also have a longevity bonus plan for people much of it was people in that category who have maxed out and been with us quite a while, and it's based on their years, and they get a extra payment at the end of the fiscal year.
Madam Chair, in today's employment market is so tight, I want to make sure that we fairly compensate our employees so they don't look other places for jobs. Then we have to go through the whole thing of hiring somebody, training, and all of that, so.
I agree, Dave. I would like to see us retain and attract rail staff by providing a competitive compensation package.
Well, and where I am, so Caterpillar, we do get bonuses every year, but the bonus is based on a couple of different factors, one of which is your salary, your merit increase, and then it's a percentage of how well the company did that year. So they factor all that in. So I've never not gotten one, but it can vary from year to year as to what it is. But it is nice to have. It's motivating, I'll say that, because it's something we're taught to think of it as part of our salary, but because you don't see it every month, it comes in a lump sum. It always seems like an extra, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, none of it is to say we can't do things differently. But I agree with you, with Dave and Daisy as well. I mean, it's hard to get good people anytime, especially when they just go and leave. Pastures.
Yeah. I know it was like shrinking as you guys.
Good call.
Anyway.
Thank you.
Sure.
And then at the end of the financial report is the listing of expenditures for the month in the amount of $819,298.01.
1 cent. Couldn't you have done something about that 1 cent?
Seriously.
I'll take it.
Can we just give them a penny?
We're on to salary by a penny.
Yeah. Great merit.
Are there any questions on the details of that? And I'll mention this in the internal control, but this is one of our internal controls in that the board sees everything, the total expenditures that went out for the month. And they can question any of the detail, what it is. So an extra look at what goes out the door. So this requires a voice vote.
Are we ready for that then? Do you have questions?
I don't think we have a motion yet.
No.
Well, that's
okay,
right.
I'm
I was
sorry.
waiting for him to finish.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't know if you were
I
finished
should-
or not.
Getting
Okay.
ahead of myself.
I move that we pay those bills.
Okay, so we do have a motion by Scott and second by Daisy. Okay, so Emily, will you please call the roll?
Christine Barr.
Yes.
Dave Barry.
Yes.
Susan Busenbark.
Yes.
Michael Campbell.
Yes.
Gwen Gregory.
Yes.
Liza Hickey.
Yes.
Jay Caston.
Yes.
Paul Mills.
Yes.
Scott Poynton.
Yes.
Daisy Porter Reynolds.
Yes.
Dee Runnels.
Yes.
Nadia Sheikh.
Yes.
Michelle Simmons.
Yes.
Thomas Stagg.
Yes.
Laura Turner.
Yes. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Okay, next we will move to reports, and a report from the Rails president. I do not have a report for this month, so we will go into committee reports. And let's start with Paul and the Consortia Committee.
Thank you, Laura. The consortium committee did meet on Monday, October 15th, so that was relatively recent. Key topics we had were well, the key thing I'll talk about is the Rails Consortial Support Grants, which had been awarded and were also discussed. I suspect Dee and Jane may have more to say, but my general feeling is that people were pleased with the process. It was clear that Rails put a lot of effort into coming to a fair and equitable formula to award these grants to support the libraries that are actually doing the day-to-day work of resource sharing in our greater community. I will now defer to Dee or Jane if they'd like to add anything to that section.
I would just like to add that now that we are, acting on our expanded definition of an LSAP, in other words, a consortia that among other things, is getting financial support from Rails for doing the day-to-day work. We are now funding 368 out of 412 library agencies in Rails. I think that's really good. That's a very good advocacy talking point, and it just feels like we're doing the right thing in terms of putting our money into resource sharing.
Anything you'd like
That
to add?
sums it up nicely.
Okay.
Is that including all types of libraries?
Yep.
So those 44. I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. Those LSAPs include all types of libraries,
LSAPs do.
but I didn't have a chance to go through all the types of libraries, and the majority of libraries in consortia are public libraries. So
So definitely, I thought that was that's a culmination of years, really, you can say years of work. I think it's had a really positive outcome. Other than that, we actually, Aaron Skov from Swan actually did a presentation of public library IPLAR data. He was specifically looking at trends in circulation, program attendance, and e-resources, to name a few categories. I think we had a good discussion about that, and I think further study would be interesting to connect that to economic conditions, because I do think you see public libraries start to decline and rise based on that, similar to what I think when I used to work at a community college library, what we would see with enrollment at community colleges seemed really, really closely hewed to what economic conditions were. Jane, Dee, anything else you'd like to add from the consortia committee?
We also had a very interesting discussion on governance structures, because several of our consortia are looking at revamping their governance structure.
And again, as with I think every Rails committee, all the documents from the Rails Consortia Committee can be found on the Rails website, which is where I was reviewing them as I was talking to you. So, as always, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the committee either here, or if you think of something later, please don't hesitate to contact me.
Thank you, Paul. The executive committee has not met, so we will go back to Paul for the policy committee.
Oh, how'd that happen? Policy committee has not met, so no report, ma'am.
Okay, so we'll pass the ball to Jane.
Resource.
Yes.
It has not met either.
Okay. All right, so we will move to Rails reports, and we will start with the Rails monthly report by Dee.
yes, thank you. So I was happy to be able to include some information in my report about library funding and advocacy. We did discuss advocacy last month as a part of a potential task force or committee for the board. And so this was, I thought, timely. Also, I thought timely was I included a press release about a summit that the American Library Association recently had about school libraries, the state of school libraries, which I thought was also timely given what we have been talking about and what we know about the status of school librarians in Illinois in particular, not just Illinois, but how under the gun they are in terms of being, their jobs being maintained in schools. So I think we can, certainly work on some of the findings from the summit. I was also interested that they talked about developing compelling stories and messages. This is a theme that keeps coming up. It came up it's a goal area in our strategic plan. And it also came up in the, I think in the funding, the federal budget includes big gains for libraries. And there was just a lot of, here we go, a successful campaign. It talks about how important it was that advocates shared their library stories and demonstrated to elected leaders how libraries address the unique needs of their community. So I thought, very synergistic, and I'm just glad to see we're on the right path with some of those plans. Trying to think, what else did I want to bring to? So it was great having so many of all of us at ILA. Thank you all for attending and presenting. Dave did a great presentation. We heard a lot of good things about that with Carolyn Nance, his director. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about my report, written or otherwise.
Well, I was kind of wondering if, I think Christine is on the phone. I know we've talked a little bit about the school library situation
Yes,
in Illinois,
great.
but I'm not familiar with the specifics. I know we say it's bad, but if you could tell us maybe, Christine, a little bit more specifics of what the challenges are or exactly what the situation is, that would be great.
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a lot of schools, we're fortunate in the Chicagoland area that we have certified school librarians in schools. However, it's not everywhere. Even as I live in Geneva, and Caneland, which is one school district over, they have no school librarians. So they have volunteers who operate the library, and basically they just house the books and check them in and check them out. So there's no, future ready library skills being taught, no critical thinking skills as far as libraries are concerned. Librarians in schools, we collaborate a lot with the teachers. So I know downstate, the situation is even more dire where they have the libraries sit empty of, they may have books, but nobody's there to take care of them or the kids.
We could certainly have as an agenda item, Laura, and board members next month, or a report on school libraries in Illinois. I think that would be really good.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
great. And thank you for Christine.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I don't know if anybody else is going to the School Library Association conference. It's on Friday, so I'll be there.
Yep.
And I'll just try to gather as much information as I can to help put together that report, if you would like.
That would be
Yes.
great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do we have access to data, in addition to staffing at school libraries, do we have access to data on how much they have for collection development and e-resources?
Might be part of the per capita grant.
The school
As
It
far
might
as,
be part of the,
so the school,
Sorry,
are you
Chris.
talking budget? I didn't quite hear the question.
Oh yeah, I was curious if there's access to data on, like, in addition to staffing at school libraries, data about what their collection budget is, including e-resources. That would be really, I think, really instructive to see.
Sure. Well, I can tell you from personal experience with our.
hey, Christine, you're
with our
kind of
district-
fading in and out. Are you moving away from the microphone or your?
Nope. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I think you just need to speak up a little bit.
Okay, no problem. I'll
Thank
put my
you.
teacher voice on.
Okay.
School libraries are funded by the district, and so each building receives a portion of the district budget, and then it's up to the principal to determine how much of their building budget they want to go into the school library. So it could be as little as $500 all the way up to, $3,000 and, or more, I don't know. I know for me personally, my school budget is $3,500, and that's for books and supplies and cataloging materials. The district takes care of our databases, so that does not come out of my budget. We rely a lot on grants and book fair money if the book fair committee is willing to share the profits of their sales. So it just kind of depends.
Thank you.
I think it really varies a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does. It does.
I think one of the biggest challenges, like Christine said, is that the school districts vary from school district to school district as to, whether they have a teacher librarian or if they have a technician or they have volunteers there.
Right.
So
There's no teeth, I don't think. I mean, I guess there are, but they're not enforced. I
Right.
think there is a requirement that there be a teacher librarian, but at least
Right.
in the district.
In my district, they have the retired principal who only works part-time as the elementary librarian, and at the middle school, it's a tech who works there. So they're neither one of them are certified librarians. So
And when I briefly worked at RSA, and we made the trip several times to several, usually elementary school level, although there were some junior high, high schools in there. It was often a matter of really high turnover as well.
Yeah.
So these people had to keep being trained and trained and trained, and they were only there for a few months, and then they had to train again. So that's also an issue. If they have anybody, they usually don't stay very long.
Yeah.
I think it's also worth mentioning that aside from, the varying levels of funding that schools from school district to district to district have, there's also varying levels of belief in libraries among the administrators.
Totally.
So a school with a low budget might have an administrator that believes in it and puts money
Right.
towards it, and the school has lots of money, they might be like, who cares, and they don't give any money, so.
That's a good point.
You can find
Just
everything
throwing
on the
money at
internet.
schools
Right.
isn't necessarily going to solve the problem. You have to change the minds of those administrators.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, we'll work on that with Christine. So thank you, Chris.
Yeah, good information.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, we will move on to the Service of the Month Finance Internal Controls, and this is Jim.
I was asked for this month, as I did at this time last year, to give a little presentation on what Rail's internal controls were. And you see references to our design, implementation of and maintenance of internal controls in the auditing letter every year. And the auditors do look at that, but they do not opine to your system of internal controls. But I wanted to talk about some of the major internal controls that Rails has. And there's a couple overriding principles that guide our implementation of controls. We want separation of duties, which means that nobody does any complete process from beginning to end, such as on cash, they don't do the billing, collect the money, deposit it, and record it all. We have separate people doing all of these functions. We limit the access to cash and Rails accounts, which means that we don't try to touch any money. Virtually nothing comes to Burr Ridge. So, virtually all revenues of both us and particularly our LSAPs that we do the accounting for is billed and collected through a lockbox process in which the money in the lockbox is deposited right into the bank account. There's very little of us filling out a deposit form and bringing it to the bank. And then we have approval and second reviews of all transactions. But a less formal goal of this is avoid temptation. We don't want to have any situation in which an employee or somebody handling finances says, gee, I think I could get away with this and abscond with money. And you've got to know that there's a price to that, and it's not easy to do. And so we try to build those deterrents into our system so that people are not even tempted to do that. But some of our examples are, as I said, separate people working on billings. We have an accounting specialist who does all of our billings. Accounts payable, the same thing. Jean, as most of you people know her, because she pays expense checks. Cash receipts, we have a separate accountant other than the person who does the accounting for like the LSAPs. Separate people record the receivables or the receipts, and then separate people do general ledger entries. And all entries to the ledger are reviewed primarily by me, and in my absence, a second person, one of our senior accountants. Same type of procedure applies to expense reports and requests for payments. They require documentation, be it copies of receipts for what they've spent or the invoices and approval of the invoices. And this is by the time they get to Jean, and she looks at it and will prepare it, and then she will give the batch to me, and I will check over the accounting entries that will go into the ledger for that, and I'll look at the documentation. So that's another level of review, and I'll print the checks, and then separate people will sign the checks. And on signing the checks, the checks are primarily signed by Deidre and or Jane, or not and, or Jane, and if they're $10,000 or more, it's one of our board member officers provides a second signature. Laura did to a slew of checks today. And as I mentioned, virtually all receipts go into a lockbox, and all funds are billed. When we do internal electronic movement of funds, that's when we transfer money from our money market account at Wintrust into the checking account. It requires a separate person to initiate that transfer, and a second person, usually me, that approves it. And that's within internal accounts. If any money goes outside of Rails as an investment, such as in the CDs, with people, currently we have none, we cash them all in. That requires we do a internal memo authorizing it, and it'll be authorized by Deidre or Jane and another officer board member. So the board has some involvement in that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, all of these, our investments are all reported as part of the monthly financial report, and all expenditures are reported in detail in the same report. And payroll is, which is our largest aggregate expenditure, has several number of approvals before we pay employees. And they start with the time card, which is approved by a supervisor, and then the finance department is processing the payroll, and human resources, not me, one of the people at human resources reviews that, and I have overall authority over that also, if need be. But we have several people looking at the payroll before it goes out, and they assure that there's no names that nobody knows who they are on that. And virtually all payroll is direct deposited to the person's individual account. And then finally, we limit access to the accounting system to accounting personnel. We all have separate passwords so that somebody doesn't have somebody else's password and could both initiate and approve, for example, a journal entry or a bank transfer. And so that's the gist of what we do. It's worked out very well, I think. Are there any questions? Anything you think I may have missed? Or
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for all the work you do with finances. The Rails always seems to have a impressive financial picture, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You do a good job is what I'm trying to say. So thank you. Okay, Jim, did you want to go on to report on the effect of the delay of the APC grant?
Yes, I would.
Can I just say something introductory first, if you don't mind?
Yes.
I think, this is, I have to say, it was the sobering number of millions of dollars that we have spent on keeping Rails going out of the reserves. But I just wanted to say that there's a lot of board history here. There was a lot of discussion for those of you who weren't on the board, in terms of what to do when our budget was cut so much and when the cash flow was limited so, as much as it is now. And the board was, everybody was the board, the staff were very But we had spent a lot of time accruing this big reserve. We had sold buildings. We had been very under budget for the first few years of operation, several years. So there was a lot of money in the bank, and the decision was made very, everybody knew what they were doing going into it, but it just seemed very important to not cut services to members at a time when they needed them most, especially. And so that was why we made this investment. I just wanted you to all know that this was done very, everybody really was, very serious about understanding what it meant to spend this money, but also understanding what it would mean to not spend it. So those were tough times. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to give that little bit of background.
So I did a recap of the year-by-year woes, you might say, to our financial statements. Basically, the major impacts are shown in the differences in the fund balances from year to year of our two major governmental funds, the general fund and the capital expenditures fund. We do not even fund we did a one-time funding of the capital expenditures fund, so anything that we spend out of that is a reduction of the fund during the year. But in fiscal year 16 was the first year that the state did not adopt a budget, and our appropriation, our area per capita grant was reduced to just under 6 million, which was a reduction of just over 4 million from the amount that was typically allocated to us, 9,879,110. And we did receive the full amount that year, but our general fund balance due to the 4 million gap declined 2.3 million. And the capital expenditures funding was over 0.3 million. So we had a total decline that year of 2.6 million. In fiscal year 17, the same thing happened. We had the same appropriation, so the same $4 million reduction, but we only received about $1.9 million of the $5.8 million allocated to us. And so we had a very large drop in the general fund balance of 7.5 million. And a total decline of 7.7 million. In fiscal year 18, our funding, our APC grant was restored to the traditional level, and we received the remainder of the fiscal year 17 money and only a portion of the fiscal year 18 money, and so we had a lower decline of about 1.2 million. But we had a big capital spending that year for the renovation of the Bureau Ridge facility, and we had a total decline of 1.9 million. Through September of this year, we'd received one area per capita grant payment, and through September 30th, our general fund balance was 0.7 million lower, and capital projects was 143,000. So overall, from 16 through the first 3 months of fiscal year 19, the balance in the total governmental funds declined by just over 13 million. And this closely corresponds to what the decline in the cash balance is, because these are governmental funds and there's not too much accruing and other things that come into play to affect the balance other than our revenues and expenditures. So the cash balance declined about 13.4 million. So it pretty well paralleled the decline in the funds balance. And in looking at that, we had a receivable of the funds due at the end of fiscal year 18 of just over 5 million. And that's basically the amount that we're using of our own funds now to due to the state the delays in payments, and the permanent effect is more like the $8 million, which was the reduction in the Aaron per capita grant for the 2 years. And as Deidre mentioned, we did not make drastic cuts in our expenditures in those 2 years because we didn't want to undo what we had already started, and we did not want to severely curtail our services. We did some things on delay of staff hiring, and we did some consolidations, but nothing drastic. We basically kept up our services. So going forward, hopefully the state situation will improve, but it's hard to tell. We're probably going to be carrying some amount. You know, there will probably continue to be some delays in payments, but there is quite a bit in the hopper with the comptroller, and when she's able to pay those bills is hard to determine. But we are getting something already this year. So,
Jim, I have a question on your report. So you kind of broke this down by fiscal year, which makes perfect sense to present the info. But in your third paragraph, which is fiscal year 17, if I'm doing the math right, the APC appropriation was 5.8 and change, and we got 1.8 and change. So we were about $4 million short there. Then in the following year, you say the appropriation was restored to the 9.8 million and change, but we received 7.5 million. But then you say 3.9 million of that was really money from the previous year.
Right.
So, so that 7.5, if you subtract the money that was really from the previous year, it's really like 3 million or something. So we were about $6 million short in fiscal year 18. Am I doing that right?
Are we expecting a more check yet?
Yeah, our receivable at the end of fiscal year 18 was just short of 6 million. Yeah.
It was short 6 million, or we received just under 6
Oh,
million?
our what was still owed as part of our grant was just under $6 million.
Okay, so I was thinking that right. Okay, and is that? I mean,
it
in
gets
theory,
a little,
still like.
We have every expectation that the 16
vouchers
is-
are all submitted for payment. I checked the comptroller's website last week, and I found that you can see what is in the hopper, and there's a mixture of what was left for fiscal year 18. And many of these vouchers were submitted a while ago during fiscal year 18.
Sure.
But it's a matter when the comptroller can place them in line for payment. And a number of fiscal year 19 vouchers are already in there. About pretty much, I think about half of the award is already in there for payment, maybe a little less than that. So it's not that the state library is delaying putting them in for payment. They're doing their job, and
they're using smaller amounts too.
Yes.
which was their suggestion, and that it might be easier
to get some money flowing.
Yes,
in smaller vouchers.
right.
But the comptroller has 7 or 8 billion of bills to pay, and so she has to prioritize.
Sure.
When they go out.
She needs to reprioritize.
Right.
I don't know. Do you want to say anything, Greg?
No, I think Jim's done a good job with that.
Okay.
I think, the issue is, yes, you expect to get it. I wish we could sit here and tell you when, and simply cannot.
I know you do. So do we.
And it's not unlike, we owe many, many, many public libraries in the state their per capita grants from FY18 as well. They, of course, don't operate for the most part under those funds, but they certainly are helpful in their communities.
Okay.
That answer your question?
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Yes.
Okay, we will move on to the report from the Illinois State Library.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and greetings from everyone here at the State Library, the entire staff, not just the 4 of us here, and also Secretary White. So we had both of the library systems here yesterday discussing delivery, and I think that will be discussed later on, so I won't go into that. But again, that was another very good meeting between our office, Southern Illinois University, and the 2 library systems, so we're pleased about that. System annual reports are being reviewed. They should be completed, and you should be hearing something from us by the end of the month. Public library grant applications should be up and available to public libraries. We've completed that very, very soon. I'm not even sure what the delay is at this point, but the deadline will be January 15th of 2019 for submission of those. The library construction Live and Learn grant program, those applications are up and available. They too are due the middle of January. We just hosted a grant meeting for libraries interested, and we had 27 libraries attend that. So there certainly is some interest in construction once again. We are actually about ready to announce, I would say, the school per capita grant applicants or the grants for FY19. We've reviewed the applications. We are matching school attendance data with the State Board of Education data now. That's being actually done in my office, and I know for a fact they're about 50% of the way through that. So those will be forthcoming very, very soon. That will be good news for the school districts. And I am pretty certain it's going to be paid at the statutory maximum again this year, based upon the numbers we were looking at late yesterday afternoon. So that's good news for school libraries. I would also point out in your discussion about schools, and this was brought to my attention for review from Jacob Roskovinsky, who's the past president of the School Library Association, regarding the new school funding bill in the state that has passed the legislature and the governor has approved. There is a provision in there about school libraries and school librarians in each building of a district. That, of course, has a goal for implementation by 2027. So as we're thinking about school libraries and the state of them today, hopefully that will change in the next decade. So we'll find out. So that has a lot to do, with what the future holds as far as taxes and libraries as a whole as well. So we're looking, that's another issue. So I think that's it, actually. I think we're good.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions on the phone? Okay. Hearing no questions on the phone or in the room, we will move on to new business. And thank you, Illinois State Library. New business, the resource sharing plan. I believe Veranda is going to present this.
I'm gonna join you at the table. Do you mind if I
Oh, me.
sit next to you? Daisy, do you
Yeah, a little bit.
Too late, sucker!
You're more particular than I am.
What are your standards? Thank you, everyone. So, I'm sure you've all given a thorough review and shared with your family and friends the resource sharing plan. Just want to say a few things about it and answer any questions you have. First of all, I want to thank the Rails Resource Sharing Committee for their contributions to the report, to the update of the plan. It's required by code, administrative code. The Resource Sharing Committee was especially helpful in adding the definition to the third paragraph of the first page. That was added by the Resource Sharing Committee. The plan was the last review of it was in 2012, and it was done by what was called the Member Advisory Group, MAG. Not so surprising. Dee was a new Rails member at Oak Park Public Library and was a part of that committee, coincidentally. So thanks for that. A few changes to note since the 2012 plan. The definition of a library card was changed to be defined by the system, and Rails included that. The requirement of the completion of the Ilinet Interlibrary Loan Code survey in conjunction with the annual certification was added. And the specific contact information included in a library card holder's account was changed to be set by the library's board of directors. Let's see. There are a lot of, as you can imagine, with 412 publics, along with 126 or so academics, over 500 schools, and about 200 specials. There are a lot of variations on the theme and ability to resource share for our members. Our goal and role is to support those and the goal of this plan is to support those libraries in resource sharing to the extent of their ability. And that was our goal in doing so. And just lastly, the plan is subject to approval by the state library. Does anyone have any questions? Anyone on the phone or at any of the sites have any questions?
Question, how many public libraries choose to not provide non-resident cards? Is there a large number of those?
That's a great question. I don't have the quantifiable number, but I will tell you this. Our colleague, Brian Smith, who is in charge of our website, because we're required by code to post who does and who doesn't, and I believe there are about 235 that do it because I had to do something with that information. And I have to tell you, we had to come up with a new category as opposed to no, you don't participate, because the ones that weren't participating, a lot of them were like, no, it's not that we don't want to, we're surrounded by other publics and there's no unserved, and they did not want it to be shown that they were a no because they didn't like that looked like they weren't participating in resource sharing.
I don't blame them.
So we updated it to say not applicable as a third category.
Good.
For response. So, and that's mostly, as you can imagine, and ironically, in large metropolitan areas, that's the case. Yeah. Scott, I presume you elected not applicable as opposed to no. Right. So, that's a good question, but yeah. So for a lot of folks, to be honest, the biggest questions I get around participation in the non-resident program is how can I make it affordable, because I have huge economic differences in my community and there's only certain, by law, ways that you can do it. So that's really the biggest question. Are people wanting to go above and beyond and supporting access to their library is really what I mostly help with. I've had anyone that's like, no, I wish we couldn't.
Well, we have a sort of solution at Aurora that you may be aware of with our scholarships.
Say more about that.
Sure. So our non-resident fee is set at $160, and we have a library foundation. I know not everyone is that fortunate, but we do. And they pay $135 of that fee to any non-resident, to any qualified non-resident who gets any kind of financial service from the government, whether it's free school lunches, Medicaid, any kind. We'll take anything. We do require the family to pay $25 to ensure that they actually have an interest in using the library rather than in simply getting a free benefit. But that is one way we are complying with the law. It's private dollars that are going toward that. But I'd be happy to talk to anybody about that if they're looking for something similar wherever you are.
Great.
How many takers? Do you know?
We have a couple hundred right now, I believe. Oh. And we have a great deal of unserved people in unincorporated Aurora as well as outside of the Aurora borders. So I don't have the numbers, but I can get them to you.
That's great. Okay. Any other questions or clarification? The plan is ready just in time for you to share at the holiday season.
Well played.
Right.
All right. May I have a motion for the approval of the Rails Resource Sharing Plan?
So moved. Second then.
So who moved it originally? Was it
Arm wrestle.
Dave? So moved by Dave, second by Daisy. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Aye.
Motion carried. Okay, disposal of surplus inventory, and Mark will present. Is Mark here?
Mark's not going to present. Good. Bye, Dave. Mark is in
So
Champaign.
last month you
Okay.
approved disposal of a number of vehicles that were no longer usable. Mark identified another one, which I believe his words were, it's basically a doorstop. So we are
Quarter of a million miles.
approve disposing of
Of the doorstop.
as well for scrap metal.
Okay. So may I have a motion for the approval of the disposal of the listed vehicle?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jay, second by Michael. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion approved. Okay, a membership change, Veranda.
I'd like to present, and you have a summary for Southland College Prep Charter High School in Richton Park. For those of you who haven't been as involved in this process previously, we do a site visit for any potential proposed new member in the resource sharing department. I also want to say, because Rails is committed to the in upcoming potential new standards, we work under what current standards are in administrative rule, but we also share with the libraries we visit the upcoming standards and send them a copy of that as well, to give them a sense of what's coming, and what, how it would benefit them. This is a charter high school in Richton Park, Illinois. I did this site visit myself. The librarian had only been there less than a month when I was there. And the school has a commitment to 100% graduation and 100% accepted to college. As you can imagine, well, or maybe to me, as you can imagine, it presents a very rigorous academic schedule for students, which sometimes can be a challenge for the library in terms of getting library time in there, because the teachers are teaching to test a lot. She's very committed to the students. She had done a lot even in finding us, first of all, and wanting to engage students with our BiblioBoard platform that's available to them already. They have a great performing arts program, and you'll see my note that the broadcast communications class also utilizes the same space, which leaves the library very unsilent. I'll say that. But they're well located for student access. The volleyball coach is in the current season of The Voice and just went on to the next round.
Wow.
And I saw her in the Tribune yesterday. So, does anyone have any questions about the school?
And when you say membership change, you just an addition?
An additional, any change.
Not an exception to?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. Just another, and you'll see this, I believe, in how the memo is written. The Illinois State Library makes a final decision on membership, and we recommend these changes. And I am reminded by that because even if, when a library unfortunately announces to us that they're either closing or leaving Rails, usually because they're closing, we recommend the suspension. We don't have final approval of that. So any membership changes are recommendations from this board.
Where is Richton Park?
South.
South.
South suburbs.
That's not my strength.
You drove there.
I don't care.
Why don't you put on the map?
Yes, on that map there.
We'll give you 20 minutes.
It is in Illinois, I know that.
It's 57
GPS,
and
you don't have to
south
know
from
where you're
I-80,
going.
just a few miles
By
south of 80.
Kankakee? Okay.
Not that far south.
Not that far.
Closer to 80. Yeah.
Got it.
Okay.
You had said they have a commitment to 100% graduation.
Yeah.
Do you know what their graduation rate actually
It
is?
is, 100%. Yeah, yeah. But I think it's pretty intense in that community. There's also a public high school in this community as well. And I did know it was south.
You don't need to know that with GPS.
Thank you. Someone understands me.
Me too understand.
May I have a motion to approve the recommendation as presented and request final approval from the Illinois State Library?
So move.
Second.
So moved by Gwen, second by, moved by Michelle, second by Scott. Okay, thank you. Motion, do we have to
All
do?
in favor.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Motion approved. It wasn't on my thing.
You're very literal.
You threw me a loop there, Emily. Okay. Moving on to unfinished business. 9.1, Rails Board Diversity and Representation. This will be a discussion only. And Dia's going to start by reviewing the memo in your packet.
Right. We discussed this last month and didn't reach any decisions or consensus even, I would say, and then agreed to talk about it some more, and not because we hadn't reached any consensus, but also because I believe Daisy was not present, and I believe Christine was not present. I'm not sure if
I don't think Gwen was either.
and Gwen was not present. Were you present,
I
Christine?
was there.
You were
Yeah, she
there,
was
okay.
there.
I apologize, not Gwen. So we wanted to give you an opportunity to weigh in. Essentially, this, there's like two related facets, I guess, which is the representation on the board in terms of, type of library, trustee, public library trustee, et cetera, as well as just the general issue of diversity. The larger issue of diversity, not just geographic diversity or library type diversity. I would say that, we, just to kind of recap a little bit, Rails makes a big effort to get lots of candidates for every seat. The at-large seat is the only one that isn't sort of specified for a particular type. And we generally have gotten all types of libraries running for those at-large seats. However, as in life, it's about who votes. And the public libraries vote much more than the other types of libraries vote. So when we were at the State Library yesterday, we did have a conversation with Greg and Debbie Eggert about why it is the way it is, which is in that we're required to have a majority of the board be public library trustees, which he can explain that if you're interested. Obviously, any changes to that is a change to the system law, and I really don't recommend that because you don't know what would happen when you open up the law, because they could decide they want to discuss our funding level or all kinds of fun, apocalyptic potentially. So then we got to a discussion of, maybe what we're really wanting to do here is just increase awareness of types of libraries and just kind of have a discussion of what it really means to be multi-type and how to have this better representation and awareness, just sort of in a more general sense. So that was my take on it. If anybody else would like to add to or correct that, that would be fantastic. So I'll just stop right there and let you all talk.
I thank you. I'm glad to see that Dan is going to be going to a special library in November. I know a lot of his member engagement meetings have been at public libraries, so I'm glad to see he's reaching out to the special libraries now.
Yes.
And there are about 850 school districts in Illinois, and so we have 500.
About 554.
Yeah, something like that. Schools. So and that's only libraries. That's not school districts, right? So there's a lot that are not even represented.
Yeah, they may not have a
Right.
qualifying.
Exactly. And so even on that level, we have a long way to go and getting that representation on the academic side. We're not very well
Well, so I'm sorry that I missed the last meeting, and I had brought this issue up earlier as well. And I was also thinking of it not specifically in terms of the representation of types of libraries, and I think we're making good efforts on that part, but also in terms of representation of like the population of the service area in this group. But I was doing some librarian research. I couldn't do it on the rail service area because it was too complicated, but for the state of Illinois. So, in the state of Illinois, the African-American population is about 15%. The Hispanic or Latino population is about 18%. Having more representation of the different groups in our service areas on this board would be really good. And I don't know, there's not one way we can do that, but I would like to talk more about how we could do that. That's a problem for the library profession as a whole, but I think our board could look at ways that we can be more representative of our users as well.
I'm sorry.
That's one of the problems, kind of like, I would like to see a breakdown by rails, because I think, how much of that population's within the city of Chicago?
Well,
And that's all, like, I would like to get numbers as to,
Well, I have numbers for Cook County and DuPage County, but I didn't do like every single county. But say, let's see.
But I think what Dave's saying is the numbers for Cook County, not all of it certainly, but some of Cook County shouldn't affect whatever ratio we have in our minds of representation within rails, because it's not in rails.
On the other hand, neither should
even
Southern Illinois.
Even in DuPage County, DuPage County is 15% Hispanic.
okay.
That's a pretty good portion.
Sure. I suspect Will is
Right.
close to that.
And parts of Cook County that are not in the city of Chicago also have
Sure.
a lot of diversity.
We represent Cook County. We represent Chicago Public Schools as a Rails member.
Yeah, so that's a huge amount of people there. So in Cook County,
So if we represent Chicago Public Schools, Chicago belongs in it.
yeah.
Right,
So,
that's
Cook County is like 25% African American, Hispanic. And the schools, if you're thinking about schools, it's even higher percentage. So I think that's just an issue. It's not like we can figure out an easy solution for it, but I'd like us to think about it.
Regarding the types of libraries, I think that for at least some of us, myself included, the representation that we have might belie some other representation that we have. So I'm on the board for the Warren County Public Library, but because I'm a faculty member for Monmouth College, when I'm not here in person, I'm at Monmouth College and I'm meeting, in the library at Monmouth College, and the director of the library and I are in close contact, and she was planning to come to one of our meetings. She was actually planning to come to this one, but of course I'm not there, so she's not there. But I think that some of us have multiple hats that maybe aren't obvious in, the initial sort of statement of our affiliation. And so I always am kind of thinking of that academic public duo when I'm in these meetings. And I would suspect that that might be the case for others of us.
makes perfect sense, and thank you for that.
Just to clarify, for those that weren't here last month, one of the things that we learned, I mean, some of this was new to me, but someone looked up the statute, and it's mandated that the board is 15 seats, and 8 of them must be public library trustees.
15 is the maximum that it can be.
But I thought, after we read the language, it made it sound like it had to be 15.
I thought it said it had to be that was the maximum.
Okay.
That's what I
And then just a majority has to be.
It's the maximum.
So since,
You're correct.
Yeah.
okay, so since
Thank
it
you.
is 15, then the majority
It's
is
8, just,
Right,
yeah.
right.
I don't think we would want a smaller board.
No,
That's-
absolutely not.
No.
Yeah.
No, so we're always going to be at the max, which means there's always going to be 8 public library trustee seats. And then I forget what the breakdown of the other types were, but there's 4 at large, right?
I think, well, there's, 8 plus school special academic.
They each have 1 seat each.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
there's 4 at larges.
Yep.
And the point I had made was, and I'll say it again, no, nothing against our public library trustees, but as a working public librarian, I'm going to want to get in on this. And so are many other working public librarians. And public libraries vote a lot, so that's why oftentimes the 4 at-large seats
yeah.
become public library.
I know.
Working public librarian seats. And
We have
thus
a-
it's crazily skewed towards public libraries because now there's suddenly 12 of the 15 are in some way representing public libraries.
Right.
Does somebody know, Adib, perhaps you know, what was the original thinking behind having a majority of the seats be public library trustees specifically?
I'm so glad you asked.
Greg, that's what I meant.
Well, it goes back to the history of library systems, period, because they were all originated as public library systems. Still today in legislation, the public libraries actually control the establishment, formation, change of system boundaries. It is determined by 10 or more public libraries coming together on that decision. And so...
The trustees specifically.
Well, public libraries, it's not really even the trustees. I'm sure the trustees of those individual public libraries would have a say, but it's the decisions of the public libraries that determine the formation of any library system in the state. So the legislation regarding your board governance follows that it's really a public library issue in many respects. Even though
Greg,
you offer services, because you must remember that the multi-type issue was developed to assure that other libraries were brought in to share resources amongst all types. So
to clarify, Greg, what you were just
I will admit.
What you were just saying, and I have zero plans or desire to do this, but are you saying that any 10 public libraries can band together and start a system? Is that what you just said?
It has to be approved, but you can.
It has to be approved.
Right.
Approved.
But knock yourself out.
But only.
From the 4 corners of the state don't decide to do that because it would be very difficult, but that is what the law reads.
I'm still a little uncertain, and perhaps this was addressed last time, and I'm sorry I couldn't be here, why they would be public library trustees necessarily rather than directors or staff who are generally more engaged in the day-to-day work of libraries, with the exceptions of all of you here.
And I just want to say, I know, but that you want to say something too. But in other states, it is not like this.
Okay.
Their trustees are not involved in it. So this is history of Illinois, and but.
Because I'm sorry, I'm not
At
quite
least-
finished.
yeah.
My trustees are generally local and not, with one clear exception of Joe Philippek, who's not eligible to serve on the Rails board, I imagine. My trustees are concerned with local issues, and they, I believe, although I haven't asked them, would not have an interest in serving the Rails board. And I believe that there are many other libraries in a similar situation.
Surely.
And so that's a question that I still have.
As a trustee, I could see the importance of having trustees, non-professionals, non-librarians, in an oversight position. Otherwise, you could have all librarians making decisions across the state. Now, some people might think it'd be a great idea.
Yeah.
I think spending public funds, having outside people look at what's going on, I think is very important.
Or does it have to be 8 or 15?
Right, I think that's the point.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
That seems skewed to me too.
I
Why
would
does it
offer-
have to be so heavily tipped? Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I would offer a point of clarification on that. It is not 8 public library trustees. It is just 8 representatives of public libraries, whatever capacity. So Dave, you are correct, it could be
No, it
library
says trustees.
professionals, could be trustees.
No.
The issue of trustees should be on your policy.
No,
not-
it says trustees in the statute, right? That's what I
Or
remember.
board members, is it trustees or board members?
Which is the same thing.
Either way.
Same thing, but
A majority shall be elected or selected from the governor, oh, it does say governing boards. I'm sorry. You're right. The member public libraries. Yes.
But, you know, just to speak to what Dave was saying, and I totally respect that viewpoint, but once a member like, well, the Braves isn't even funded by us. The money's coming from the state. So what I was going to say is, you know, are the dollars, it's like a secondary organization at that point. Are they really local tax dollars anymore, but it's funded through the state? I'm confusing this with LSAPs.
But I agree, we do need public library trustees. I'm
Right.
not gonna has to be a majority, personally.
I think they look at us as being the bosses. I mean, we're the bosses and the staff is the employees, and we just make the big decisions. And I think why they want us to have the majority.
But from my point of view, as a special library, why would I want a public library trustee to make a decision based on my library? Because they really don't have much information or knowledge of what's going on, and that could be maybe same for an academic. And I'm not sure about a school, but so I guess that's what I'm saying. How does that affect non-publics, which are a part of this system too?
And especially when we're here to talk about board diversity, this is a statutory barrier to full diversity on the board.
So, and I think last meeting, I think it was Scott, you had come up with a breakdown of how the libraries would be represented if we were represented by membership.
Right.
Do you remember that?
I do. Unfortunately, those notes are in my
So-
packet from last month.
And I'm not, but I think my point is the more fair way to look at, here are our members, should we be trying to go towards what our membership represents? I think the big question is how we are set up now fair to what we're trying to represent? And if the answer to that is no, how could we change it?
Beyond that, do we want to change or increase certain segments of membership? To
Yes.
be more diverse too,
And maybe we don't even need to change that. Maybe it's about some of the things that Dee talks about in here, awareness. I know my point of view is a special. Sometimes what lacks is we talk a lot about a lot of projects that are public library dominated. So it's hard to build awareness or interest if you're not in that environment, because we're really not talking about a lot that has any bearing on me. So it becomes kind of a circular problem. We don't talk about a lot, so then we don't get engagement from a lot. Specials are the smallest, so I'm not advocating just for specialists, but just to how to create some more things that libraries of all types feel like there's some teeth for them. And not all of it may come from changing the board. I think some of the things like Dan and the special library outreach, maybe, I know he's doing some stuff with Gwen too, with the academics. Maybe it's some of those things also.
Well, all right, it just has come back to me. I believe, and don't quote me exactly, but I believe it was, if we broke it down by kind of like voting members, so to speak, it was 5 public, 6 school, and then 2 specialists and 2 academic. I believe that adds up to 15. Yeah, I think that's what it was.
So,
It doesn't have to be 15, but.
Right.
But I guess.
But
for the lack
as Dee said, then we would have to go back to the legislature
Right.
and have to change the law, and by doing that, then
Well, I heard a,
But as we just heard in Jim's report, you know, we don't have to reopen this to have them mess with our money.
right.
They can do that at will. Like,
Yeah,
they,
right,
do that anyway.
you know, they have proven that they can, you know, monkey around with the funding coming to us. When I say they, I mean the, you know.
Not in a fundamental. They can not appropriate
Sure, on
it.
paper we got the money, but we didn't get the money.
Oh, you know.
Dee, another question. Do we ever have situations where it's difficult to get candidates from a certain type of library or type?
Yes.
From public library trustees specifically?
Every type.
Right. Okay.
Except public library directors.
Got it.
Seems, yeah. I mean, that's just, that's just the nature of. I mean, and, Heartland's in the mix too, don't forget. Because they are, they would.
The same statute
we
governs
wouldn't-
their
yeah,
membership.
Of course.
Right.
We wouldn't want to have competing legislative proposals of make a board.
No.
And I don't know if any of the libraries have had any experience about recruiting a board member and their level of commitment and participation. We've done that a very little bit and have had no success at all recruiting and having them commit. We did it one time, and he was 5 out of 6 of the first board meetings. So we asked for his resignation, which he promptly gave us. A lot of wasted effort and time.
Sure.
So I'd be interested in knowing what makes it advantageous for you and Caterpillar to be a member of Rails. And that's not maybe something to discuss now,
Right.
but it's like.
I mean, I can give you a couple of answers that come immediately to my head. Resource sharing, because we do engage in resource sharing, would probably be at the top. Another one would be it's a way to participate in the larger library community, to know what's going on, not just in our little neck of the woods, but across. And then the third thing I will say is, as a special, the smallest represented, it's us to kind of share with you guys what we do too, to be a voice here and for us to learn from you and from you to learn some things from us too. So those would be my, I guess, top 4
Not too shabby.
answers. Oh, well, that's
great
answer. Did I get an A plus?
Yeah, you did.
Well, I think another thing to think, a lot of our users are the same people.
Yeah.
Or they move through, like they go to the school library and then they come to the academic library and then when they graduate, they use the public library. So it's
Right.
a lot of the same people
Right.
that we're serving. And sometimes it's confusing that they don't get the same things. I know in academic libraries, we can complain a lot about these students show up here and they don't know how to they have no information literacy, they don't know how to use anything. And it's hard to know what the schools that they came from had or didn't have. And probably public libraries get a lot of, I'm guessing, people, like once you graduate from college and you can't use them more, then you have to go to the public library and try and do some research and trying to get those kind of resources. So in some ways, this is a way to try and coordinate those things, which is very challenging, and not everyone wants to think about that, but I think it is valuable for libraries as a whole.
I agree. It's very well said.
Yeah, and I mean, having been an academic librarian myself in a previous life, I think that there are values that all library types share. You know, we are in favor of access. We are in favor of, yeah, go ahead, where are you going to?
When you say library types, do you mean the people working in those libraries? Or?
Well, I think that academic library people,
where I'm
what
going
were
with
you
that is
saying?
anybody can get elected to a library board, whether they believe in that or not.
Well, that's true. I guess that's true. So I guess I'm not speaking from my trustee perspective, but from my librarian perspective. So I agree with you that having trustees may not have that perspective. But from a librarian perspective, I would say we believe in access. So.
One thing I think about with public library, predominance on system boards, which I've worked in regional library systems, and I know have the Joe Surgeon on this board, is that of the library types, public libraries have, to me, an obligation to serve everyone in their community. Right. And an example I often frequently talk to my community is I think of story times, and we do story times for babies. all the way up to story times and memory care units. And everyone in between is served by a public library. And that's not to diminish in any work that's done by other types of libraries that serve specialized populations, whether it's a special or school or an academic. When I come back to the public, we are everyone in the community. So, and
Well
I
stated,
don't,
Paul. Well stated.
Yeah. So could it just, I'm sorry. Could it just be a matter of, I think as we said in the last meeting, of creating a part of each meeting that might have a subject matter that is of interest specifically to the smaller represents. I don't know if that's just one step we could go forward in making sure that we're all more aware of.
It's an easy
the
first step
needs.
to take.
Yeah,
It
right.
is.
We've already
I was
taken
going to
it.
say the same thing.
Well, yeah.
We need to expand our horizons in diversity-wise. So these special libraries just fascinate me. I'd love to, spend 5 or 10 minutes a board meeting hearing about various special libraries and what they get out of being in Rails and why it's worth it to them to pay the fee to be a member and.
There is no fee.
No fee.
Right.
But they would pay if there was one.
But
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I think we all just need to start thinking more broadly.
I mean, in all seriousness, we have taken that by having a report today from
Right.
Laura and Dan, and we'll and certainly can do more. We can also work on recruitment, as you're suggesting, Gwen. I mean, we will do whatever you want us to do, essentially. But I would not recommend to change the system law. I really think our energies can be better spent, frankly.
So maybe
That's
what we want to do
my
is
opinion.
start with what you said, kind of the baby steps. Well, I don't even want to say baby steps, but the beginning steps of
Things we have control over.
we're starting to include more interest. I think for me, and I don't know of the other two, the academic and the library, having more things on our agenda at some point in the future, building towards where we have more things that would be of interest to all libraries, not just maybe one type that I would like to
Absolutely.
see. And I think those are doable.
Is it possible, and putting technology aside, because I bet that's going to be the big answer, to meet at some special academic or school libraries as a board so we can be more fully invested in that particular location?
Yeah, could we meet at Caterpillar?
You can come on November 15th. For special library.
Technology.
We have to be sure that we have to be.
Oh, yeah, that's
We have to
right.
comply with the Open Meetings Act.
So let me ask you that. What do you need to comply? Just a Polycom?
Or
Poly-
a Cisco or anything that's sent. I mean, the
I
state
mean,
library isn't using Polycom anymore. They're on Cisco right now. So
Right.
I mean, we have video record. We have meetings.
Yes, you do.
We have the ability to have meetings at multiple locations.
Okay.
Is what we have. So, if it's sometime in the future, I think that was a really good idea. But yeah, we could. And I'm not just saying just for specials. I'm also saying in terms of academics and schools too.
Sure.
Well, I would be happy to investigate whether we could host it at my institution, or I'm sure, I'm not up on the exact details of technology that we have, but I'm working out somehow.
your people call my people.
And clearly at Monmouth College, we have it set up. because
Right.
I
There you go. We could go
connect.
there.
So we would be happy to host.
Yeah.
I will speak on behalf of
I
the
think
college.
those are all wonderful.
That's right.
Those are great. Those are steps in the right direction. But it's probably not going to change the makeup of the board.
But it does change the fact.
It might change what we know.
Our awareness
Right.
will be
Sorry.
increased.
Yeah.
It's okay.
No,
I'm done.
please,
No.
no.
I'm done.
No, just one
Your
thing,
turn.
another point that Gwen had raised, and that I've been thinking about also was Gwen talked about diversity in the profession, and one thing that's something I know ILA has been working on, and that's been a conversation. I don't know what role would be appropriate for us as an organization to serve in that, but I think that is something worth pursuing, worth spending some energy on.
Yes.
As well.
I agree.
Probably in collaboration, not to duplicate others' efforts, but see if we can augment and enhance those efforts.
Right,
Yeah.
I don't
Increase
know
diversity.
what would be the best way should we have to develop some concrete ways to improve recruitment? Or what would be?
I have an idea for a next step for, I know that Richard Kong, who's the director in Skokie, is involved in a local diversity effort.
A network, just an
A
informal
an
network.
informal network. And I think that I would like to start with him and see what he has been doing. He's very passionate in this.
Maybe he'd like to report at our next meeting.
I will talk to him about that.
Didn't he do some, isn't he doing something or done something with PLA?
Pardon me?
Hasn't he done something or
Yes.
is doing something with PLA in that? I
Yes,
thought so, yeah.
but he's got something just, specific
local.
that he's started in, for Illinois, as I understand it. So.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, it's a great conversation. I appreciate it, and I hope you understand my reluctance to to go to that place. I'm not saying we can't ever, but I just think I don't think we're all that that's a necessary thing to do. I think we should try these other things first, and I think recruitment is. I mean, we need to do a better job of that anyway. Although, Jay brought this up, and Paul had mentioned this to me one time. The main thing, obviously, is that we want people who really want to be on the Vernon Area Library Board, but you just have to be sure you recruit in the right way, I think, so.
I have one other thing.
Yep.
So you may know that Carly is the consortium that the academic librarians in Illinois mostly are in. Is both sort of like an LSAP, but also like other kinds of consortium things. So I've been working with Carly to try and get them to give us more information. And I don't know if learning more about Carly would be interesting, especially for the board members that are trustees that don't know about it, be something, because that is an important group. And I would say the academic librarians are often very focused on Carly and what
Yes.
Carly is doing,
Right.
less on, say, what Rails is doing, because Carly does a lot of things for them.
Right, that's
Carly
very
has its own whole set of committees
Right.
and all kinds of stuff like that, so you've talked to Ann Craig a lot about Carly and what they do and how that works. I don't know how we could not be integrated with them exactly, but just work together.
Yep, absolutely.
Maybe sometime they would like to come and give a little presentation about what Carly is.
One of the little issues on that is that they meet a lot of the time when we meet. A very specific issue. That doesn't mean that can't be changed, but you know how that goes. You find a day when people can meet, and there's probably a reason why we meet this day and they meet the same day.
Change.
But anyway, and I don't mean to be a downer. We have tried a number of times, and it's just kind of ironic, actually. But absolutely, yes.
Okay. Anything else on this topic? Good discussion, yes. Thank you. Okay.
I think you're over the hump.
Right. We are moving on to board committees, task force, and engagement. Discussion and possible action requested, and Dee will review.
Yeah, so I did revise the two charts. I revised one of them based on some comments that you made, the advocacy. And then I made a note to myself that we need a better name for the task force on the unserved. And by Jove, if Jane won yesterday, which is universal service, which is, because I was looking for something positive.
Right.
Nothing could be more positive than universal service. So if, I welcome your questions or comments on these charges. I think, once you approve them, and you don't have to do it today, but you can, we'll get to work getting them together and getting working.
They look good to me as is. That's my input. Right. I like the universal.
Yep.
Except I'm gonna always want to say.
You drive it in the car, you know,
Right.
often get those creative.
What was it? Universal services.
Yep.
Well, I'd volunteer.
Super, thank you.
With added the PS that I'm the one that doesn't like to drive.
That's fine. Yeah.
And then I'm the one that like some sort of bumbles around on the phone. But I'd even be convinced that I could maybe drive an hour out of town to.
Okay.
And where are you from again?
Here.
Oh, you're from here. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd come here, you know, to be a part of the video thing. It's-
Right. I know I've heard you on the.
But then I look, it's like, and who would I be with as I'm?
Yeah, I know. That's
sitting
right.
here?
Yeah.
Right.
We could probably find some people.
I'm
No.
happy to be part of the board advocacy group.
Okay.
I'd be happy to work on the advocacy.
Okay, great.
How many people can be on the advocacy?
I was thinking as many, I mean, there's no reason to not have as many as
Then
you
me
want.
too.
Okay. Oops, all right, so I have Michael and I have. That's right, because we were talking earlier, Gwen and I, about she's involved in getting the Chicago area ILA
Meetup.
legislative meetup. I couldn't get the straight.
Did you want me to talk about that briefly?
And
Sure. So you may have heard of the Library Association legislative meetups, which they've expanded quite a lot in the past few years, have more of them. So the one that is for Chicago, which includes like the borders of the city of Chicago is what it includes, started 2 years ago, and we have been growing, and so we're gonna have it again in the spring, probably in February sometime. Probably this year we'll have it at Harold Washington. Library Center downtown. And I haven't gone to any of the other meetups to see what they're like. Have other people gone to? Okay, good.
The one in DuPage, kind of like, it's been very helpful, I think, for our elected officials there. They each have assigned a table. The librarians from there sit at that table. So they're hearing back and forth what libraries needs. Then the Eric, our library lobbyist, speaks on issues. There's a handout to give the elected officials what we're supporting and what we're not supporting. I think it's a very good. I've talked to Congressman Foster, a number of people about attending these things.
And I've gone to the one for, I guess, Laconia, for Northern Illinois.
Buffalo Grove.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've gone to it for the last 3 years or so.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
That was the first one, and it's the largest one.
Yeah, and that's always well attended. Same kind of thing, Dave, where congressmen all show up for that too. That's really a good meetup.
Yeah, well, it would certainly be a great thing for anyone
Mhm.
here to attend. I think in Chicago, the challenge is, like, it's not that big of a geographic area, but there's a lot of people, so there's a lot of legislators.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And there's really only one public library, so they've done good at supporting it, but it's not like you could draw in a whole lot of different public libraries with different ideas or like a lot of different
Right.
public library directors who are gonna advocate for their libraries.
Right.
It's
And
like
they,
a wall of people from Chicago Public Library.
and understandably, they want to talk to their constituents.
Right.
So
right,
it's,
Right, so if, in the area of Chicago, I don't know how many dozens and dozens of possible legislators there are, but a
Right.
lot. So, and I actually don't even live in the city of Chicago anymore, but I work in the city of Chicago, so that's the issue too, I think. So, so we're hoping to have a great people participate in those wherever they live. I think that they're really useful.
yep, for sure.
I'd like to be included in the advocacy as
Great.
well.
You don't have to tell me now.
Answer with,
Great.
In the universal.
Universal. It's gonna take some
It's going to take some.
muscle memory.
Right.
You know, like-
That's good. Yep. We need motions.
Well,
I
Lori,
think.
before
Yeah.
Laura and Dee, just because of the interest in board members, I know the draft charges actually do speech.
They do?
They do.
Just the first
The second one doesn't.
Second one.
Second one
This
doesn't?
one.
It is-
Just
Well,
says
that's right.
board
It is. Oh, good, perfect. Never mind then.
Okay.
I was gonna say we want to adjust that based on, which the interest is wonderful, but yeah. If we didn't have more than 2 for the first one, which I don't think we did, then we're fine.
You have 2 now.
We can have more.
I know,
On
but
the, on
we
the
should probably have the charge
universe.
reflect that appropriate. If there's more interest, that's great. We should just adjust the charge to reflect that interest.
I can take, the reason I think that 2 is in here, now that I look at this, is that when I wrote it, I was not yet sure whether it was okay to have more than 2, because if you had majority of a, but according to Julie Tappendorf, it doesn't matter, because they're all Open Meeting Act,
Compliant.
et cetera, et cetera. So it doesn't, we can have more than 2.
Well, our quorum is
Post
8,
the meeting.
so the majority of our quorum is 5, right?
Right. There was some reason our board members, right, hasn't there been traditionally we only had 2? Or was it 3?
Yeah, I'm just saying though that.
Right.
Our
We
quorum
don't,
is 8, the majority.
no, it doesn't, we don't need to worry about the number. So we'll take the word.
So we can take that
Men
out.
to take the
Yeah, I
word
think-
2 out, let number 2.
I would trust Julie Tappendorf to interpret the only.
Me too.
Okay, so,
I would make a motion to approve the charges as amended.
okay,
I'll second.
so that was all second by Tom.
You did both of them, right?
Yes.
Great.
I said
So
plural.
both of them,
Yep.
yes.
Okay, I just wanted to be
charges.
sure I heard.
Right.
Yep.
So, is this a roll
No.
call or
Just voice vote.
voice vote? Okay, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no?
Aye.
The killer.
Okay, next we have an update on system membership standard data collection, and this is a report by Dee.
Yes, I just wanted to let you all know that we are getting ready to roll out the standard data collection. We've been testing them internally. You board members, your libraries will be getting, your library directors and you will be getting an email from Veranda, I think early next week, asking your libraries to be testers of these standards. Rhonda has also, and some of our colleagues have identified additional libraries to test. So we have a good mix of multi-type and large and small, et cetera. Our staff group working on this has, the best thing is to have a very long collection period so that people have plenty of time to kind of get used to the idea. And so it doesn't collide with any one, like certification or per capita, or that it kind of collides with all of them, but at different times. So we're thinking mid-November till the end of March or so. We're only asking for the core standards. Brian Smith and Wes developed a truly elegant and simple web form, so that's all great. And I am happy to tell you that yesterday we were at the State Library talking about this, and the State Library is going to be very helpful to us. They're going to send out an email communication to all of our members telling them that they have to complete this. So that's really good because it's going to make them do it, because we need to have this information.
Right.
We need this information so we can tell if they're really appropriate standards. So we're actually getting there.
Looking forward to it.
Me too. That's it.
Okay, next we have board development, Rails Special Library discussion only, Dan and myself, but mainly Dan.
Do yoga. Yeah.
Well, he made the flyer, so I figured.
It is an auspicious start, but okay.
Yes, you consider, even though you didn't
I
ask.
know. I don't have the manners I do. It's just hilarious for me to say. So as Laura mentioned, and Laura, thank you so much for your help on this. We put this together. This fact sheet is sort of a combination of data that we've combed over through from Rails, but also just some of the observations to sort of confirm about special libraries and what special libraries are. I'm supposed to be here to sort of expand your horizons, but I am also expanding my own horizons because I've never worked in a special library, and I'm just learning along with you all. Rails work a little bit more closely with the Special Library Association, the Illinois chapter specifically. You can see just how concentrated all of those libraries are in the city of Chicago, in the area. I think they have already done a good job of sort of addressing a lot of those libraries, so we've tried to focus, or Laura and I specifically have bringing new services and bringing new events and opportunities for some of the special libraries outside of the Chicago area. I think it's important to focus on the different needs of special libraries. I put that section in there about what continuing education topics libraries are looking for. I want to especially draw your attention to like marketing, project management, knowledge management, data management, embedded librarianships. These are sort of concepts that are very specific to special libraries. In a lot of ways, they are working for a very sometimes smaller audience, but the needs are great in a lot of circumstances. They are working with engineers, or they are working with medical professionals who have, who need the latest data, the latest research, the latest access to some very specialized materials. And there's a lot of pressure when it comes to that. Special libraries to also advocate for themselves and the role of the library. Laura, stop me if I'm wrong about this.
No, you're doing good.
But I think that when they're looking for those things, they look for areas. They look to each other, which I think is great. I think again, the SLA Illinois chapter has a good community. That I can see, and Rails doesn't necessarily need to replicate a lot of what they're already doing, but I think just being involved in sort of augmenting that is important. Laura, do you have anything to add that you want to?
No, I think this looks really good. It was mainly just to let people here know, like you said, what types of libraries typically make up special. I added, Dan did most of this, and the part that I added was about the continuum. And what I added was things that are somewhat different than some of the continuing education I see now, just to give you an idea of some of the different things that we are interested in. And we are having a special library Caterpillar November 15th.
15th.
So if you are interested in seeing a special library, or sometimes we just get people who are interested in seeing Caterpillar. Because prior to the meeting, we are going to do an optional tour of the 3D manufacturing lab. So if you want to see a little bit of technology, you can do that and find out more about special libraries. So. And I really appreciate you putting this together, Dan, and helping with the advocacy of special libraries.
Can I add one other thing?
Sure.
As a former sort of special librarian, maybe of interest is there's different special librarians also like to have their own special groups. So there's a special Chicago Association of Law Libraries, where the law librarians are all in that. And there's also the Health Sciences Libraries of Illinois. So they even get divided up further, sort of niche groups as well.
Yeah, I think special libraries, that term is just a catch-all.
It is.
It's everything that doesn't fit into the other.
Exactly.
Right,
That's
it
exactly
is.
right. Yep.
Because like prison libraries are a type of special libraries, and they have a very different population. Right. Right. Yeah. Okay, if there are no other questions on special libraries, we will move to Rails board member reports. Do any board members have news they would like now at your library or something you would like to? Go ahead, Steve.
Big deal at the Moline Public Library this Saturday and next Saturday. We have an art collection in our library. We've got a nice gift from a lady in her estate, and this Saturday there's somebody who is loaning us an original Norman Rockwell.
Wow.
And this is like, I mean, it's only gonna. We could have had it for longer, but this is like high security. Worth over $1,000. We're gonna. In fact, I'm leaving here to go to the little special introductory thing. It's not one of his Saturday Evening Post ones. It's it was either Ford or Chevrolet, and they were trying to have people start being interested in buying cars with installment payments or trucks with. What's this sort of wizened guy looking at this contract saying, "Well, this makes sense." And I have a friend that's seen an original Norman Rockwell and says that. The difference between just seeing it on a Saturday Evening Post and seeing it up close and personal is like, wow. And because we got Rose Franson, who's from Maquoketa and is a nationally known artist, she did the faces of Maquoketa, and it's like she's all over the country. And she's loaned 2 pieces to us to hang up with Norman. And then we have another fellow named O'Boyle that's got just one of the coolest I've seen in a long time. Grizzled farmer standing in front of a corn crib. So that's this Saturday and next Saturday. And there's no charge. You can come see an original Norman Rockwell.
Cool.
Very cool.
That's cool.
I have something.
Go ahead.
So this is a bid select new automation system for their. So Carly is going to be migrating in the next some long period of time, a year, from our Voyager system to Alma. So Carly selected Alma. That's been a long time in the works. So everyone in Carly is one or the other.
Both.
Tom?
The Alpha Park Library was a recipient of one of the Project Next Generation grants. We are going to have our first cohort start next. We're really excited about that, being able to participate in that grant.
Great.
And in the true spirit of Halloween, Peoria Public Library is being, if you're familiar with the, it's called Movie Festival, Peoria Public Library was interviewed for The Haunting of Peoria Public Library. We're a haunted library. Everybody that was interviewed, well, I can't say everybody. Most of the people who were interviewed are on our maintenance staff. They're actually, but it's pretty funny if you like that kind of thing.
That's great.
It airs. Is that what you call a podcast? Today, so it'll be available if you want to listen. I am not on it. I have not seen it.
I mentioned this last time. Tomorrow night is our Music at the Carnegie at Kewanee Public Library, and it has a Parisian theme this year, and there's still tickets available if anybody's interested. I believe the cocktail hour is at 6, dinner starts at 6:30, and it's catered through a local program starts probably about 7:30.
Great. I guess we have to bid Veranda goodbye at this point as well.
Okay.
Next Tuesday is her last, Friday, the 2nd, that's what I was going for, is her last day. Contributions to Rails.
So I'm not sure.
Miss her.
Where is she going?
She's going to
Tulipa.
California.
It's a library association in California.
So what city?
Of which Daisy
will you be
was
based
a
in?
member.
What city will you be based in?
The organization is in San Francisco, going back and forth from year to year because they do a lot of work. They're looking to do more work with ALA, And
Oh, you're not moving out there?
no, not yet.
Oh, okay.
Oh, now I thought you were going to California and we're gonna not have to deal with winter anymore.
That would always be my preference. Everyone on the board. And I'll still be or should I walk out? Good night, Detroit, I love you. No, and I'm still available as a resource, obviously. Before today, I thought my name was very close. Wait, Veronica Pitchford, who works in a library.
Pretty funny, right?
Don't call her.
But not a veranda.
She's
not
a
an exact
very
match. You're
close,
still
though.
an original.
We'll get it too.
Yes! Let's not talk
Did you
about
just say
that
her name
right
was
now.
Veronica?
No. Well, you could say. So thanks, you guys.
Thank you. Okay, agenda building for the next board meeting. Our next meeting is Friday, November 16th at Burr Ridge, which is a week earlier because of Thanksgiving. In the agenda minutes. And anything else?
Well, not that I can think of at the moment.
Anything anyone else would like to add to the agenda for the next board meeting?
Is it Burr Ridge, correct? Is that right?
Yes, we go
alternate.
Kind of hibernate a bit now for.
Right. Okay, well, it's that time. Thank you all for attendance. I call this meeting to adjournment at, I got that military time again. 2:58. 2:58 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep.
Bye.